I got full with the milkshake. Got full. I couldn't finish it, but I'm gonna finish on with the video, with the story. Yeah, but Trevor, he's been trying to hide his drug addiction, but he can't hide it from his girlfriend, and he also him and Hezekiah of course has the same grandmother. He hasn't seen his grandmother. I would say like for about like 3 or 4 years. Like you haven't seen his grandmother. He's been staying away from her for a while. And she's just been hoping that he'll just drop by to visit her, but he just haven't been coming by visiting. He's been keeping his distance from her because first things first, he's too ashamed to come around her when he know what he's been doing. His bad habits and everything. And but he ends up after work. You know, um, Liba was supposed to be making dinner, but she ended up burning something in the kitchen, so they had to, go out and get dinner, which was like some chicken, like a chicken meal. And when they returned home after getting it, well, what had happened, like before they even got the chicken meal, Trevor and Liba had ended up getting into an argument in the car. Their baby, they got a little baby. Um, their baby's name was Armin Hugs Rad um, Radcliffe James. He got Liba's last name and he got Trevor's last name. And he was named after his grandfather. His grandfather's name was Armin Hugs, and he passed away. But anywho, the baby ended up staking up his diaper in the back of the car, and Trevor was getting upset with Liba about it, telling her that like she should have had changed his diaper up and that it's making the car stink in the inside. He was telling her to change it. And she looks over at him and was asking him like why won't he start changing his son's diaper? Because I'ma just say a little something about Trevor. He hasn't really been a great father to Armin. He's been literally like avoiding Armin, like actually acting like he doesn't have a son. Like he'll just go into the house. He never picked it up, Armin. He never spoke to him, said anything to him. Liba mostly have been handling Armin all by herself as if she's a single parent, even though Trevor is living up in her house. She looked over at him and was telling him like why don't you start changing the baby's diaper? You don't never do it. And Trevor was saying that it's not his job to do that. Like he's not gonna be touching on the baby's diaper. Like it's her job. She's the mother. She pushed it out the baby, so she has to change the diaper. And they were going back and forth to the point where Trevor ended up pulling over the car on the side of the road. It was dark. Let me remind you, it was dark, and he had made Liba get out with baby Armin, and he ended up driving off. So we're leaving them on the side of the road. Yes, left his girlfriend and baby's mother, along with his son on the side of the road where he drove off to get his supply of what. And Liba, she was devastated and hurt. She had to walk to the nearby chicken eatery and sit in there till he comes back. And she was just hurt. She had to sit at a table to herself with baby Armin. Back to Hezekiah at home when it was nighttime. Irma had let Hezekiah know that she was about to go bathe, about to go take a bath in the tub, and that she wanted him to do something simple. Like watch over the bubbling hot soup on the stove. The soup was bubbling on the stove, and she wanted him to watch out for it. Because she had to go take a bubble bath. I know I'm saying a lot. But as soon as she got into the bathroom, as soon as the bathroom door closed, Hezekiah had instead went outside, to have a little one-on-one talk with the little bird that he kept in the mayonnaise jar. He also had this mayonnaise jar like with duct tape around it so it can like look dark in the inside of the jar. He was just chit chatting with the bird and was saying like one day you're gonna fly, one day your wing is gonna be fixed. He was just having a talk with the bird as if the bird was talking back to him. But he doesn't know that the whole time he was doing that inside the soup was bubbling down to nothing. And then when it bubbles down to nothing, it end up catching on fire, smoking up the whole kitchen, catching on fire. And Armin, he took notice of the smoke that was coming out of the kitchen window. So that made him went inside. When he went inside, the stove top was blazing up with fire. So he was scared. And he had to put down his mayonnaise jar and he had to run to go to get his grandmother. As soon as he walked into the bathroom, Irma was not breathing at all while laying in the tub. She was gone. She was already dead. So it happened she just died of a heart attack while, soaking in the bathtub. Like she just that. And so Hezekiah didn't know what to do. He's trying to wake up his grandmother, so he's really panicking. So he ended up having to grab the telephone, and he remembers Liba's telephone number because he'd been to Liba's house before. He went. He remembered Liba's telephone number and ended up calling up for his brother. And but Trevor couldn't really hardly understand him. Hezekiah was just panicking and crying and saying that there's a fire and that their grandmother is not, breathing and stuff like that. But he was just like in tears, like like he was just, panicking. And that made Trevor like rush over there. He rushed over there with his car with Liba and the baby, and he went and seen that his grandmother's entire house was, on fire, smoking. And Armin was, standing out on the outside, just scared, trembling, scared, and crying in tears. And Irma, of course, was dead. And the Netzer kin that I meant, not Armin, I meant Hezekiah was just standing back, scared. And next person that could have had took care of Hezekiah, because Irma has been taking care of Hezekiah. The next person that could have had took care of Hezekiah, I'm gonna have to probably do a part 3 on this one. Sorry. But the next person that had to take care of Hezekiah was the aunt. The aunt's name was Samantha Darnell. Like, she was the next person that could take care of Hezekiah, but she did not want to take care of Hezekiah at all. She was letting Trevor know that he's going to have to take his brother in. She already has children of her own, and she just cannot do that. She does not want to take care of a grown man because Hezekiah is like 22, 23 years old. Trevor's a little bit older than him. Trevor is close to 30 years old. But yeah, she was letting him know, like, I'm not about to take care of no grown man when I got 6 children of my own. So Trevor had no choice but to take in his brother, and he had to take care of his brother over his girlfriend's house, Liba's house. And Liba was kind of uncomfortable about that, extra person in the house. But then again, she just, went along with it because she liked it for Hezekiah to come around. Hezekiah was just very lovable towards his nephew. He really loved it, baby Armin. He paid more attention to baby Armin than Trevor himself. But one day, Trevor decided, to keep Hezekiah's mind off of their grandmother's death. He wanted to take him out, like to clear out his mind, take him out for a joyride. And Trevor had his other friend on the car with him. And Trevor ended up driving somewhere with this other friend to a particular house. And Trevor had went inside that house, to do what, like shoot up drugs. And Hezekiah was just sitting to himself, and that friend ended up talking Hezekiah into like getting on Trevor's car when Trevor was nowhere around, and wanted to, teach Hezekiah how to drive on Trevor's car. He said, "Man, your brother's not teach you how to drive. Come on, come with me. I'm gonna teach you how to drive outside." Which was a bad mistake, because this guy had let Hezekiah get in front of the wheel of the car, and once Hezekiah hit that gas pedal in the car zoomed off and hit a tree. Both of them could have died, but thankfully they didn't. Hezekiah, nose was, kind of busted, and the guy kind of had hurted his forehead right here, but they both was okay. As for Trevor had no clue that his car was crashed, messed up in the front. So he had went outside and seen that it was nowhere in the yard, and then he ended up walking to try to find his car, and ended up seeing like the tracks from the wheels on his car, heading towards like a fieldway, and he ended up seeing like his car crashed up against the tree trunk, and he seen his friend getting out the car, and Hezekiah was still stuck in the car. So Trevor ended up running up, and he just went to clean off about his car crashing against the tree. He was yelling out, "What the heck happened? Like, what happened?" And like the friend was trying to explain that it was his fault and stuff like that, but all Trevor saw was his brother sitting in the front seat of his car with his hands on the wheel, looking confused. And that's when Trevor snatched Hezekiah out of his car. And then as soon as he got back to that house, Trevor had took off his belt and asking Hezekiah, "Why did you do it? Why did you do it?" While just whipping Hezekiah with his belt, with his leather belt. Hezekiah was doing like this, screaming and crying, and said, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." stop hitting me, I'm sorry. But then he ended up grabbing a hold of Trevor's belt to stop Trevor from hitting him. And that made Trevor mad. Trevor's like, let go of my belt. But Hezekiah was not letting go. And then he ended up kicking Trevor in the mouth right here. It's not funny. He ended up kicking Trevor in the mouth right here to defend himself. And that made Trevor really mad. And that's when Trevor, had ended up hitting Hezekiah with his fist, instead of the belt. Viewers' discretion is advised. So Trevor was really mad about what had happened to his car. He was really mad, like he was getting on his brother more than he was getting on his friend, because it was his friend's fault. His friend talked Hezekiah into doing that. And after Hezekiah got punished, Trevor had somehow got to Liba's house and had made Hezekiah stayed over there. And he told Hezekiah that he better not talk to Liba. He better stay away from Armin. He better sit somewhere to himself and think about what he had did. He had to sit there silent to himself. But when Trevor had left out of the house, that's when Liba had sat down and talked it with Hezekiah and was asking him like what happened, what's wrong? And Hezekiah was just crying like, Tre- Tre- Trevor hit me. He was like hurt. He was, he got the mind of a child. He was hurt. He was sniffling, crying, slobbering, and snotting all over himself. I know snotting ain't a word, but he was snotting all over himself. He was just hurt because he couldn't believe how his brother hit. I mean, well, he could believe it because it ain't the first time Trevor put hands on Hezekiah. When they was children, he would always try to whoop Hezekiah. But as a grown age, it kind of scared him because they grown. But he tried to call himself defending himself towards his brother. Liba did not approve of that happening to Hezekiah. She was upset about it and was like letting him know like he's not your daddy, he's just your brother. He can't tell you what to do. If you want to talk and say whatever you want to say, you can say whatever you want to say. That's what Liba was putting in Hezekiah's head. And when Trevor came back, he felt bad about. He was still mad, but he felt also bad how he had got on Hezekiah. And he had, sat down with him and had let him know, like, he still loves him and everything. Hezekiah was too scared to come near his brother because, of course, his brother put hands on him. But he ended up coming near his brother, like, hey, man, I love you. I just, I was scared. I was scared that you would have killed yourself in the car and stuff like that. And after a while, they all end up eating dinner together, eating hot food for dinner. And had leaned over a bit. Hezekiah ended up ended up taking a nap inside of Liba's living room. But during while he was sleeping, he ended up waking up out of his sleep. He startled when he had heard his brother yelling. And so happens Trevor and Liba was arguing. It's all because of, Liba telling Trevor that he needs to go out, get himself together, get clean. Trevor was telling her that he needs to stay up out of his business, stay up out of his face and different stuff. And just him and Liba were just going back and forth, get back and forth. And it had gotten so bad that Trevor ended up picking up a vase that Liba had gotten from her own grandmother, and her grandmother also passed away. He ended up picking up that vase and throwing it against her bedroom door, shattering it all to pieces against the door. They're like, why don't you come and say all of that? Why don't you step out of the bedroom and say all of that in my face? Like he was confronting her and just trying to get the bedroom door open as if he wanted it to, put hands on her. But Liba was just sitting in there and just holding baby Armin to keep him calm. And she was just telling Trevor to get out of her house, just yelling, "Get out of my house! Get out of my house!" And Trevor like, "I ain't going nowhere. I pay the bill. I pay part of the bills and all of that stuff like that. Blah blah blah." But he ended up leaving. But he had left, Hezekiah there. He ended up leaving again. And when he had left, that's when Hezekiah ended up picking up all of the tiny pieces from the vase that was shattered everywhere all over the floor. He ended up picking it all up for Liba. And he ended up walking in the bedroom and catching Liba just sitting to herself crying. She was holding Armin and was just sniffling and crying like, just crying. And Hezekiah ended up sitting beside her and asking her what's wrong. Like, is she okay? And Liba just looked it over at him and she laid her head against his shoulder. And Trevor, he ended up going somewhere, doing drugs again. And when he was doing it, he started to hallucinate. Well, he was hallucinating, but with his eyes, it felt really real. And what I mean by that is that he ended up seeing this dark figure while, high as a kite. He ended up seeing this dark figure, and this dark figure was like an apparition of light, similar to a death angel. And he ended up seeing it, and like it was like end up forming into like a tall man with a hat and like almost like a cloak, like clothes on. And he stood there, like kind of, smirking at Trevor. Like almost the type of face like I'ma soon get you, that type of face. And that kind of, Trevor wasn't scared about it, because that ain't the first time he's seen that figure. He just sat there and just stared at it with, like a vacant look in his eyes. And no, that made him end up coming back. He ended up coming back about like 2 days later at Liba's house. He left Liba and Hezekiah and the baby there for like 2 whole days. He ended up coming back, apologizing to Liba and all. Liba was sitting back on the bed eating some baby back ribs that she got from her mother's house, you know, smacking and eating. Baby Armin was asleep. And he apologized to her, said that he was sorry. She accepted his apology. They kissed, made up. And then he ended up telling her, like if something happens to him, 'cause he just been having a feeling lately. He was letting her know clearly if something happens to him, would she please take care of his brother Hezekiah, his baby brother Hezekiah. Liba looked at him like he was crazy, like, Trevor, don't start talking crazy now. Just please don't start talking crazy. And Trevor, like, I'm not talking crazy. I'm being serious. Would you be able to take care of my brother? You know, he was letting her know if something happens to him, would she be able to take care of him? And Liba looked at him and said, I promise you won't have to worry about Hezekiah being in harm's way. And it was like he felt something like a premonition or something, because sooner than later, Trevor ended up getting found dead in his car. He OD'd, and he was found with blood and foam coming out his mouth and everything. Eyes were staring at the sky as if he was still alive, but there was no life in his eyes. And when Liba got the call, she was hurt, she was crying, but she did not cry in front of Hezekiah because she didn't want him to know. She didn't want him to know that his brother was gone. She didn't want him to know that. She ended up going somewhere privately on the telephone. One of her friends ended up telling her about his death, and she was just hurt about it. And she was just holding on to Armin. But she didn't have to tell Hezekiah, because Hezekiah ended up having like this vision, like a dream of his brother, and his brother ended up visiting him. And just like having a talk with him. The two of them were just sitting at the table playing cards and stuff like they used to do when they was children. And up letting Liba know, coming to Liba while she was in bed, and like, I know Trevor is gone. I know he's in heaven. That kind of scared Liba, but that also brought peace to her, because they let her know that she didn't have to let him know that Trevor was gone, because Trevor ended up paying his brother a visit. And the story ends with Liba taking really good care of Hezekiah. And thank you. This is the end of the video, and this is the end of the story called Shutterby. Shutterby Sugarfly. I had it written down in the journal, and I hope you all have a great day. And if the Lord's will, I'll make a dinner video. Goodbye.